Hello, welcome to Maison Otaku. Come in, have a seat.
I'm Justin,
And I'm Mike.
and we're here to talk to you about anime.
For the 30th time.
30.
Yeah, somehow. Apparently some of you are still watching us, so that's pretty awesome. Didn't think that would happen.
Yes. You out there are awesome. We're awesome. Mike has something awesome.
Yes. Yeah. So not so much a new acquisition, just something, need to talk about something here. Didn't get to show these off to you. These are Lupin III Castle of Cagliostro Japanese Hot Wheels.
Legitly, Hot Wheels of Japan spent portions of their advertising budget to do these one-off castings for Castle of Cagliostro. These didn't appear anywhere in the Hot Wheels main line. They're very accurate. They actually have, you've got Lupin driving Jigen out the sunroof. You've got the baddies. You've got the Citron. This is one of the coolest sets Mike's ever found.
Yep.
And you paid like, what, 15 for it, wasn't it?
15 to 25, something like that. Either way, it's worth a hell of a lot more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Especially to the Art Tunes guys, who was so pissed off that I f***ing sniped this out from under him.
Yeah. I remember flying, because this was Colossal Con, like several years back. And there was a vendor that had a table set up that was just a budget table.
Yeah, well, it's what we used to have at cons, and what I really miss. It's just someone bringing a bunch of old crap and be like, dig through it.
Yeah. And Mike and I were digging through it, just looking around and so forth, and pulled it out of the bottom of the stack. The guy kind of leans over, gave him a prize, like, oh, I didn't realize that was it. Mike had it in his bag. We go back over to Art Tunes, because we always do, and gets an offer from them, like, so where'd you find that, and how much do I got to give you to get it off your hands?
Well, no, actually, it was worse. He saw it before, and his exact reaction was, "Oh, you bought that!"
That's one of the pieces in Mike's collection that, to this day, I envy most. And it's a fantastic piece. It's one of those cool things you just almost never find. And man, you really wish you found more things like that. It's like finding a great classic RPG, isn't it?
Yep.
That's on just a cartridge stuffed away in the back corner.
Yeah, that stuff's always great. And that's a bit what we're going to be talking about here. Bit of a complex topic this week.
We decided we were going to tackle something that's really kind of edging at the fringe, particularly something that's a very popular topic, especially if you go by the number of cosplayers.
Yes.
So stick around. We're about to play a story.
So, I know we already did a video game episode pretty recently, but, as we said, this is something we felt we need to discuss, and there's a lot we can talk about.
It's fertile ground, really.
Yeah. Now, as I'm sure you can guess just by looking at us, we enjoy some RPGs.
Oh, without a doubt. Many of my most formative gaming experiences came through the RPG world.
Yep. And just in case you live under a rock, thought we'd start by actually discussing where all this came from. And if we want to give an extra simple answer, I guess we have Tolkien to thank for a lot of that.
We do, but depending on how far back in history, we have simply the idea of the epic narrative to think. Most people would agree that most of human art, human storytelling, focuses on the quest. And if you can't go on a quest, which, let's face it, most of us suburbanites really can't.
Yeah.
Walmart for Oreos is as close as we get to heroic quest.
Which, depending on what time you go to Walmart, is not too far removed.
But, given that that's the issue, it's fun to live out a historic or fictional quest vicariously.
Yep. And, of course, back in the 70s, as I had said, Lord of the Rings, as well as many other fantasy books, were huge. And some guys got together and, didn't Gygax adapt his first draft of D&D from like an old Civil War simulator?
Yeah, interesting point to come across is that what we currently know as the pen and paper RPG actually has its roots in historical wargaming, which is very fascinating, mostly based around Napoleonic combat originally, which was the thought puzzle of what would this battle have played out like? What if the circumstances were changed?
And
what if they had an extra battalion here? What if the cavalry had half its force? Could the battle still have been won?
And of course, the simplest way to represent this is with, dice rolls and numerical stats. Very simplistic, of course, but, he took a look at this and thought, okay, well, instead of units, what if I use the same system for an individual hero character and sort of flesh this out a bit more? And the pen and paper RPG, as we now know it, was born.
Yes.
And
naturally, the moment the pen and paper was born, this nascent, obtuse concept of a computer became involved because it was effectively the same audience.
Yep. And anyone who's played tabletop RPGs, and we don't differ from this opinion too much, it's all well and good being the GM, but God, sometimes you just wish there would be, some kind of thing there to be the GM for you. And then,
Oddly enough.
Come the early to mid 80s, and all of a sudden, even the earliest RPGs, the main mind-blowing thing was, oh my God, we don't need a pencil, a paper, or another human anymore.
Really quite an astonishing achievement. But herein comes the really funny thing. We cross the Pacific Ocean, and we find that Japanese gamers and Japanese game creators have come upon a very different but similar idea. They want to play out an epic story, but the idea is, could I get through the same challenge as this character?
And it's worth mentioning at this point that with the technological limitations that were in place at the time, RPG developers from anywhere in the world, for video game RPGs anyway, were faced with a choice to make. They could either throw out any semblance of a grand epic narrative in the name of player choice, player freedom, player agency, which what Western RPGs did, or, specifically in the Japanese market in the East, you could sort of shove player freedom off to the side in the name of telling a grand epic story. And I think it's fair to say, at least in the early days, the latter was the better choice.
It's one of those interesting arguments. You will always find examples on either side, and it's an argument that's been blazing well before there was even really much of an internet to discuss it with. Because, of course, you have Japanese RPGs, JRPGs, that have fairly bland or unintelligible stories from this period, and no real justification for why they've limited it down. And you have Western RPGs that had amazing mythos, amazing instances of character, and so forth. But this was instance to instance. This wasn't there was definitely mindset and mindset.
Yes. Yeah, the things he discussed, again, it's the exception, not the rule.
This was very amazing time for gaming, especially as Western RPGs, in the effort to continue chasing more world, bigger world, more dungeons, more events, more player choice, pushed further and further to the PC, whereas consoles pushed further and further to the Japanese side, to the JRPG, to the interactive novel.
And, as we said, there's mindset to mindset difference. Again, this is a vast generalization. As I said, in the West, there's, any gamer is going to be different. You ask any different person. But the general model is, in the West, there's much more of a demand for, I want to feel like my decisions matter. I want to pave my own narrative. Whereas in the East, most Japanese gamers aren't too interested in that. The vast majority of Japanese market gamers want challenge and essentially a strive for perfectionism, which is one of the reasons why, especially nowadays, things like rhythm games are so popular.
The idea of completion, the idea of mastery is very, very ingrained there. The best way I could I could pose it is there's that moment at the beginning of an Elder Scrolls game, for instance, where you get to decide what play you are going to have.
Mm-hmm.
You can decide to be an archer with a drinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
You can decide all of the things. You are always going to be Cloud.
Yeah.
Yes, you can name him Buttface, and you can decide you're only ever going to use lightning materia, but he's always going to fall in love with the girls, witness the death, discover he's Zack. That's always going to be what happens. Because the goal is not to live out your fantasy. The goal is to get through Cloud's experience.
Yes.
That's the best explanation I can offer.
Yep. And, as time went on, both sides kept developing more and more. But then some stuff started to happen with new technology coming in.
And here's the way it goes. So, effectively, the turning point for the JRPG came out with the PS2, which was really the introduction into common gaming of powerful hardware. And that's a really obtuse way of saying it, but that's the case. Because really the first JRPG we can point at and say, yeah, things went wrong, is Final Fantasy X. But when the PS2 rolls out, the graphical leap was monumental. The polygonal games of the PS1 era and of the N64 era just did not allow the game to look that great.
Yeah.
The cinematic could look fantastic. Yeah. Final Fantasy VIII's cinematics still hold up.
Yep.
What went wrong was the PS2 rolls out, action games looked as good as the RPGs had looked. Devil May Cry looked fantastic.
Metal Gear Solid 2.
Metal Gear Solid 2 looked fantastic. These games looked fantastic.
And, as he's saying, we had all this new tech in here, and this new technology in the RPG world kind of called for a new approach. In the Western world with RPGs, where the focus had previously been solely on player choice, player freedom, they were now able to use this tech in games, like System Shock or Deus Ex or any of those titles to have an RPG with a massive grand story, a complex narrative in it added to that freedom.
Yes. You had, Deus Ex. You had a tight, well-paced first-person shooter with an RPG element and a great storyline. That was beyond revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, RPG elements and RPG storytelling started an introduction to other genres. You had Halo even, which had a mind-blowing story for first-person shooters. Yes, a lot of retreading of Starship Troopers, but still, dear Lord, you can do this on a console?
Well, and it's like, especially when you look at some of the, where a lot of that's come today, because, like I said, I used to look at Western RPGs and I'm like, wow, this is really boring. But, I look at things like modern Elder Scrolls games or Mass Effect, and then when you compare those to some of the older things, you look back and like, oh, that's what they were going for.
Previously, the JRPG could get away with this grand novel that occasionally you had to play.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was the only way you got the grand novel. It was a storytelling supremacy only they had. And it grabbed us. It kept us captivated. But then it was no longer just their ground. It was no longer just their special thing.
And especially when we talk about the PS2 era, rather than, doing what Western RPGs did and, went into the realms of, gaming that they had previously set aside, they decided to, stay the course with what they were doing, but then a few things kind of went wrong even with that.
Yes. Alongside of, let's face it, the big boy in the room, Squaresoft, losing a ton of money, gambling on making movies because they had pushed graphical ideas and graphical concepts so far in their games. They said, well, if we're already making movies, let's make movies.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
They lost so much money they had to combine with the other big boy at Enix.
Which really should have been a dream team, but this is, what I said, where a lot of things should have been going right, but just didn't. As he previously mentioned in an earlier episode, I'm fairly certain a big point on the contract with the merger was that as a result of the merger, anyone with any creative talent needed to be sacked. So throwing player choice out the window in the name of telling a grand story is fine. Problem, the stories in so many of these games are just so ridiculously convoluted. Like, I don't even need to tell you how ridiculous the whole thing in fricking Final Fantasy 13 was, but I mean, that is kind of a prime example of that. We go from these really poignant stories filled with lovable, memorable characters to unmemorable, whiny metrosexuals populating a story more convoluted than Hideo Kojima's self-written fanfiction. It makes Nathaniel Hawthorne look like John Steinbeck.
Hey, Hood Majors. Effectively, instead of responding in kind, the JRPGs narrowed their vision so heavily on doing what had already worked, because it is a very risk-averse business. Not only the video game industry as a whole, but especially the Japanese video game industry. That's really been their model for years, is if it works, keep doing it. Square is risk-averse because they're a Japanese company. Of course they're risk-averse.
Yes.
Toyota has made the same 1.8-liter four-cylinder since Methuselah was a kid. It's not bad, it's a great engine, but
yeah,
that's what they do. Do not take a risk, stay the course. And the JRPG has been staying the course of more graphics, more cinematics, and even more focus on the story for 3 console generations.
Yeah.
But what we can really come from this, clearly more story on top of existing story is not the right answer, Japan. A simple story is not a bad story. A complex story is not a bad story. But a story without a point.
Yes.
And a story that doesn't play well. I really don't think that you guys have a point where you sit down with whatever story your director, your designer has come up with and say, so how does it play?
Which I kind of wish they would have applied that to their combat system ideas, because they just keep trying to reinvent the wheel and it doesn't work.
It never works. It's never worked.
Especially all these, real-time turn-based hybrid systems. I mean,
Mike, you have one of the few times that's kind of
worked. Yeah. Here, I do want a brief sidebar. Xenoblade Chronicles. Not perfect, but they were trying a lot of things. First of all, this is one of the few real-time turn-based hybrid systems I've ever played that I liked. Of course, we could, if you want to call it a hybrid system, we can count Parasite Eve, but God, that game's just amazing. And this is sort of an attempt at an open-world RPG. The problem is, instead of being Elder Scrolls, it's World of Warcraft, in terms of how the open world works and fits together.
So, I did some thinking, and then I shared my thinking with Mike, and we both agree that there was a moment, there was a very small moment, the single game, that showed us the answer to all the problems. It was weird, but it was exciting, it was immersive, it was wonderful.
That game was, of course, Shenmue. Oh, God bless the Sega Dreamcast.
Indeed, indeed. We miss you, Dreamcast. Oh, you lovable, easily pirated scamp. Shenmue, for those of you who never gave it a chance, was open world, but linear. There were dozens of characters, amazing, richly creative NPCs to interact with or not.
Do you know where Fuku-san might be today? Would you like to try a game of Lucky Hit?
Nah, I'm cool.
How about trying Lucky Hit?
Yeah, they were just these individuals populating this, town, which, in terms of where you could explore, was all of, like, 3 or 4 kind of smallish maps. But in terms of what you could do in that, this was, hitherto unheard of levels of immersion. It has this grand narrative that it starts off with, and, you get into the thick of it right with the opening sequence.
Oh, absolutely. And then you get into the second game, and oh dear God, have I sunk hours into the second game, where you get to Hong Kong, you meet all these amazing characters, you fall in love, you drive a forklift.
But even with all this stuff going on, it's presented to you in just this, like, simulated town you can walk around in. Yeah, you can, really focus on going after your father's killer. Spoiler alert, not really. But you could also just spend your entire day blowing your yen at the local arcade, or trying and failing to hit on some of the local women, or, just walking around and enjoying the scenery if you really felt like it. Or you could stay at home and chill in the garden. It had, a day-night cycle, which was a big deal back then. One of the earliest games to have, dynamically generated weather patterns.
With maybe the exception of, with the exception of Dragon Slayer, this was the introduction of the QuickTime event.
Yes.
For the exciting moments that just have to play out with the camera just so. And the way they play them out is also a lot of fun, because failing the QuickTime event doesn't stop it.
Yeah, you don't have to restart it. It's just you have to live with that.
Things happen differently. And maybe you don't catch the bad guy, or maybe you don't. Maybe things don't go according to plan.
Having a result of your failures sticking in the game, again, that's Mass Effect stuff.
Yeah. And for just fighting the bad guys, you're playing Virtua Fighter.
Yeah.
Which was great. This was a chance for something unique, something that was distinctly Japanese, something that was distinctly an RPG, but it was not an RPG from the looking down your fists or your sword perspective of the West. This was not Diablo, this was not Elder Scrolls, but this wasn't Final Fantasy, this wasn't Suikoden, this was new. And I swear to God, if you had plugged Phantasy Star or Golden Axe on top of this skeleton...
so good. Well, if you plug Phantasy Star in it, you have Japanese Mass Effect.
Yes. And probably in a better format.
Yeah. Because it wouldn't be owned by EA.
Yeah. Japan. Yu Suzuki was right. Here's the new JRPG. You can save the ship. Final Fantasy 15, we don't know.
Yeah.
But let's not bet the farm on it. Let's bet the farm on giving Suzuki the money and support he needs, because he might just save us.
So, changing gears now, it's time for Justin's recommendation, and just gonna go right into this one. Justin, you're recommending, well, actually something fairly popular this time.
Oh, yeah. What if I were to tell you that there's a film out there with transforming robots, a humongous cavalcade of stars, and a Weird Al Yankovic soundtrack? I hope you guessed I'm talking about Transformers the movie.
Yes.
I really hope you knew that. I mean, why else were you watching a Maison Otaku if you didn't already know about Transformers the movie?
And on the off chance you didn't, we're not trying to alienate you. Please listen. We're going to tell you why you don't need Michael Bay.
Yes. This was the death knell, quite literally, of G1 Transformers, and it had everything. I mean, I cannot tell you how much everything this movie had. Very basic setup. The Autobots and the Decepticons, their aeons-long war is in its final throes. And the last great battle happens. It doesn't go so well for either side. And then all of a sudden, a new threat appears in the form of transforming planet Unicron, voiced in his last film role by Orson Welles.
Mm-hmm.
So many great lines, phenomenal soundtrack, both the additional songs. This was the appearance of Weird Al Yankovic's Dare to Be Stupid.
Which, I hate to say it, but God, I can't say it doesn't work.
But it works so well. The fact that Dare to Be Stupid by Weird Al Yankovic is used to introduce the Junkacons, whose leader Rekgar is voiced by Eric Idle, doing this fantastic voice where his whole dialogue, every line is supposed to be a TV commercial because Junkacons talk TV.
Yes.
Where'd you learn to talk like that?
TV! We talk TV! You talk some TV?
I talk some TV, and now the news. Don't touch that dial.
By George Chemo Service, your smashed up friends soon like brand new with 90-day warranty.
You have Eric Idle, you have Orson Welles, you have Leonard Nimoy as the voice of Galvatron, and it was... Damn if it wasn't a big gut punch to your childhood. Because, spoiler alert, Optimus bites it like 15 minutes in.
Yes.
I mean, it's a great moment. I mean, it's a poignant death. You know, he's got everyone around him. He's saying he will be one with the Matrix. You know, it falls to you, Ultra Magnus. Yeah, it's beautifully done. Mm-hmm. And it's the result of a long, drag-out fisticuff fight with Megatron. The fight that we all wanted to see happen. Mm-hmm. It gets wrecked by Hot Rod.
Helping like Hot Rod.
Although,
you know, I'm actually going to take a tiny little segue and do what little defense of Hot Rod I can.
Mike is going to defend Hot Rod.
Okay. Gotta get a little... I guess literature 101 with you. Hot Rod, we need to understand, is the character in the movie that we, the audience, are supposed to more or less identify. He is the audience character. Now think, you're a little kid in the 80s. You've grown up watching Transformers. Who among us would see Optimus Prime in trouble, especially at that age, and not rush in to save him? Well, it may or may not have been a terrible idea. In fact, it turns out it was. But the fact of the matter is, he was the embodiment of that mindset. He, after all, Hot Rod himself was basically a Optimus Prime fan.
Yes. And it's a very classic, simple story. The redemption of the hero. Mm-hmm. You know, an impulsive youth learns the responsibility and the patience needed to rise to the occasion. And, you know, it was kind of great that Hot Rod was every single 1980s sports car and Hot Rod cliche in one car. Side pipes, flaming bird on the hood, hood scoop with a hood scoop.
Spoiler, that did nothing.
Going doors. And voiced by Judd Nelson.
Yeah.
So, this was the sort of movie it was. It is so fun. It's really well done.
And, like, you talked about the music, just the sheer number of... Like, you don't realize it until watching it later, like, just how many musical interludes there are in there.
There are a lot. And I mean, Stan Bush's music throughout. God. The Stan Bush music...
Like when f***ing Hot Rod becomes Rodimus Prime and he opens the thing up, like, now light our darkest hour, and the touch starts playing, like...
You got the touch!
Dun, dun, dun,
you got the power! Yeah! This was a great film. It was a film that set a lot of precedents for how you could do a children's action film. Mm-hmm. Not the least of which was don't kill the most beloved character in your franchise. There were so many complaints because of the death of Optimus that the G.I. Joe movie, which had been in production at the time, which was already in the can, had to throw in the stupidest line where, Duke gets killed.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to be dead. And the whole reason they were killing these characters, because, the first 10 minutes of Transformers is a friggin' bloodbath.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, so many characters just get killed.
And the reason for that is all those characters were based on licensed cars. Ratchet is a Lancia Stratos. Jazz is a Porsche 935. Prowl is a Datsun 280ZX. That costs money. And you probably already have figures of that.
You know, I never thought about that, but yeah, that's probably true.
So let's kill everybody that costs money to produce, and that you already have an action figure of. Here's a new line of completely new, non-licensed characters for you to buy. Very, very cold-blooded, but hey, that was 80s cartoons.
Well, yeah, again, it's a cartoon doing what, as I've said in our violence episode, it's like, yes, have the laser beams hit things, have people die.
Massacre! Massacre! Massacre!
But as he said, because of the aisles filled with crying children when Optimus Prime died, they decided, well, maybe we shouldn't kill off Duke. And I want to call bullshit on that really quick. Duke is not the Optimus Prime of G.I. Joe. I repeat, he is not. No one gives a flying f*** about Duke.
We really don't.
If anyone is the Optimus Prime of the Joes, it's Snake Eyes.
Well, because Snake Eyes isn't really the Optimus Prime.
I'm saying in terms of
popularity, yes, but it's kind of like why Raphael is the Ninja Turtle that we all like, because he was the cool one. He was the one that was doing all the stuff.
Yeah, but I'm one of those weirdos who was always like a Leonardo fan.
Yeah, but Leonardo is the Optimus Prime.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. These are the sort of arguments you have. In any case, it should tell you just how deeply this film touches off, because it really does hold up. It holds up amazingly well all these years on, despite the fact that it was a cold-blooded cash grab during a period of time where every cartoon was a bloody cold-blooded cash grab.
It's like we talked about, in previous episodes. Yes, I understand that, you're making these things to make a buck. But this was back during the time they knew that you had to work for and earn that buck. It's just because, animation is a business doesn't mean it can't be art.
Right. Art and economics can live hand in hand. Yeah, learn that one too. Yeah, learn that one too, JRPG producers.
Yeah, I was just going to say that tie. And with that, I think it is time to end.
I think it is time to end.
Hey, fresh ones.
Fresh ones.
So, from all of us here at Maison Otaku, this is Mike.
And Justin, saying, enjoy what you watch.
And share what you enjoy. And here's to Season 3.
Here's to Season 4.
We have no life.
Come with me into a fantasy where there's a dream, there's a way it seems. You can be there if you want before too long. As time fades into eternity, as we gaze into the stars and think a fantasy is where we all belong.
Bye.